We are recording. All right, so hello everybody out there in social media land. We are the Flint Public Health Youth Academy, and we are excited to be back for another one of our talk show series. This week we have some very special guests in our Youth Perspective series, and we are going to literally talk about the importance of mentorship using Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as the backdrop of this conversation as we kick off some wonderful events that will be happening all weekend leading up to Monday as we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King. So on today's show, we have some guests. We have Ms. Rita Stanley, Mr. Robert Matthews, Ms. Corey Gaines Taylor, and Ms. Afton Shavers. And the Flint Public Health Youth Academy interns are here. Others will be transitioning on. And we're ready to get this wonderful show started. So we're gonna turn it over to our facilitators for this week, Mr. Cruz Duhart and Mr. Amire Ellison-Brown, and they will take us forward. Go ahead, Cruz.
All right, so I'm gonna open up the floor. Our first question is, what inspired you to be a mentor? And you can raise your hands to determine the order. Mrs. Corey Gaines Taylor.
So, hi, I am Corey Gaines Taylor, and what inspired me to be a mentor is my birth order, actually. I am the third oldest of 11 children, and if it had not been for mentors throughout my community in a small town in Mississippi, I don't know that my siblings and I would have been able to make it much further than that small town in Mississippi. And so I'm forever grateful and mindful that we must always reach side to side, reach back, reach forward, and bring somebody along with us and remember how we arrived where we are. And so mentoring is just something that came naturally to me from the birth order. And that's how I got here. And that was my biggest inspiration.
Yeah, it's that community connection that helps grow and help people succeed. So I totally understand that. And that's so nice that you had that at home. Mrs. Stanley next.
So what inspired me is actually culturally, we have mentors in our lives, and that's part of what we do as a culture. Growing up, I had mentors, natural mentors, my parents, my neighbors, and teachers and church members. And so there was that village. And so that is just a part of the inspiration to continue that legacy. And so all of those people were inspirational in my life, and many of them continue to be. And so I believe that mentoring is something as a culture that we are fortunate to have.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. Matthews.
Good evening. So when I think about this question, it takes me back to childhood in some ways, and of course, you don't think about people necessarily being mentors in a formal sense, and nobody necessarily gives you that title or gives other people who may be providing a mentor role or relationship for you that title. But I think I became very aware of the various stereotypes and statistics associated with being Black, being male, being raised by a single parent, and then also being from Flint, and the challenges that sometimes get connected with all of those things. And as I grew, I think that there were just times where I just felt this burning desire to really do something to try to help people who might be having the same experience in life. And so, it was just my way of really wanting to give back and to make it easier for others.
Yeah. Mrs. Shavers.
So I'm going to say something a little bit different. I think that representation matters. I think we all will agree to that. And somewhat like what Robert said, I don't know that I necessarily decided I was going to be a mentor, or I necessarily decided who was going to mentor me, but it was more so folks that I was raised around or that I had interactions with, that I saw things in that I wanted to be representative of. And then at this point in juncture, it's really being a representation for somebody else, like really trying to set an example for what I would want to pass on to the next generation, because otherwise we lose those skills because they're not naturally taught in like a classroom setting. So it's really representation, or giving a representation of what it is that we should kind of want to strive to be.
Yeah, you'll be up next, Dr. Key.
So I just wanted to share, I think I was mentoring before I knew what I was doing. I didn't know really that I was being a mentor. Oftentimes you inspire people and you pour into people and don't realize that what you're doing. I think for me, I've always had mentors, and I didn't necessarily call them my mentor. Like, it was people who just invested in me, and they were like I always use the word role models, right? And so I think what inspired me as I became aware of what mentorship was to be a mentor was because I almost felt accountable to my community, because I know I would not have made it to where I was and where I am if it had not been for those who have mentored me.
Yeah, Dr. Bailey, would you like to go?
Yes, sure. When I think back, and it's a long way back, I think back to around the third grade, and one of my classmates was struggling in math and reached over and asked me, "Can you help me?" And I said yes, and started helping him. But at the same time, Mrs. Odell Broadway said, "Would you like to learn how to sew? Let me teach you." And then she became one of my classic mentors and pushed me to do things I didn't think that I could do, or I didn't even know that I could do. And over the years, I've just tried to give back what was given to me from that same heart that I had at around age 9 or 10 with another person. And I think that's what really in this thing we call this village, that we know from the African proverb that it takes a whole village to raise a child. And sometimes we think that it's just their parents. But especially in these crazy days and times where people are so busy and struggling to try to just make it, it takes all of us, mentoring all of us to do it. I still get mentored. As old as I am, I still have mentors. So you never stop needing someone else to encourage you and push you beyond your limits. And when you have compassion and love in your heart, then you never stop wanting to give that back to somebody else. So I think it's just a continuum of community love that flows.
Yeah, what I'm really getting is that it's kind of like this natural sense of call to action, right? And I think that's one of those traits of leaders, is that you just step up because someone needs to do it. And I think that's a really important role in the community. And I'm so grateful growing up in Flint that I had people like you. Our next question is, what role do you feel mentorship plays in the overall development of youth and adults in our community? Dr. Key?
So for me, mentor kind of taught me civic responsibility. You know, it kind of taught me that there is a responsibility in being a part of a collective, and that there is an accountability to actually almost give a return on investment to the community. And so I think for me, that was one of the roles that mentorship and how it shaped how I look at the us versus the I. You know, a lot of people, it's always me and I, but when you think about the collective, no, it is us. You know, I am because we are because I am. Let the circle go unbroken, right? And so I think it gave me that sense of connectivity, other than The Lion King, which was always my favorite show, my favorite movie, you know, the whole circle of life. But just to let you know, so I think that was, it kind of allowed me to see that it's about the collective and no one person should be above the collective.
That's a great answer. Anybody else? Mr. Matthews?
I'll go next.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think what's interesting about it is if you think about the community piece and also development, like that really is really what leadership is. So a good leader is different from a person that just, you know, is the overseer, right? Because the leader has to identify skills or talents or gifts in the folks that they're leading. And then if you're a really good leader, you not only can identify those things, but you can also assist that person with developing those skills and sort of building upon those gifts and talents that they naturally have. And then because you do that, ultimately the community is better. So everybody that's in the community around that person, or that works with that project, or works with that Public Health Youth Academy, right? Everybody that comes in contact with those individuals as a community is better because of the natural leadership actually identifying those skills.
Right. So it's like one of that roles is like keying in and helping to find people's purpose and how they can aid and assist in the overall well growth of the whole community. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Mr. Matthews.
Okay, sure. So for me, I think it's sort of rooted in my answer to the first question, because I think mentoring and the role that it plays really should help to create an environment and spaces that really allow others to reach their full potential, to achieve the goals that they choose for themselves, to have the space, time, and opportunity to dream, and to really, you know, think about their aspirations in some serious and concrete ways. And so when I think about my role as a mentor and what mentorship should do, that's sort of how I tend to envision my role in the space.
Yeah. Mrs. Stanley.
So I was just going to share a story about a mom that was interested in her son getting a mentor through the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And she shared with me that her son had no positive role models in his life, male role models, and that all of, you know, his brother, his uncles, and his father were on a bad track. So they weren't, one was in prison. And I began to think of, you know, the situations that our young people find themselves in through no fault of their own. And they do need that mentorship. So community people to really step in to help guide them and be that positive role model that they've never seen, that they don't see, you know, in their families or in their neighborhoods. So mentoring plays a critical role in the development of youth and the development of families, so that people can, as Robert said, reach that full potential. And so we are here to defend that.
Right. It's that extra helping hand, you know, to give them that last push. Anyone else? Mrs. Gaines Taylor.
Yes. Can you review the question for me one more time? I want to stay on track with my answer, and I have something that I want to say, but I definitely don't want to be off focus.
That's fair. What role do you feel mentorship plays in the overall development of youth and adults in our community?
Well, the reason I wanted you to repeat the question is because you said, what role do the adults play in the development of the youth in our community? And so sometimes we go to meetings and we talk about things and we talk about things, and then we plan another meeting and we follow up that meeting with yet another meeting. And so are we really developing anything, or are we, when the rubber meets the road, you will find that there's a smaller number of people than were at the table for the meeting. And so when you find dedicated individuals who will show up for our youth, who will identify what they need, even when they aren't able to communicate that, who will be there. So if they're, even if they're great, if they're running track and they're great or they're not so great, and you're just sitting in the stands and you give a wave, that means a lot to somebody, just to know that somebody cares enough to show up. And so as we look to develop, it's important to listen to what our youth say and to develop the things that they identify for themselves that they would like to see in their future. And along that way, if there's some tweaks that we need to make, that we gently make that adjustment in a way that they don't feel as if we're trying to tell them what to do, that we're not listening to what they say, because I think that it is so important to listen to what they say and then try to think before we respond to make sure we're aiding in the development of the things that they want. And that's why I asked you to repeat that, because that development and the focus, listening, I think all of those things are key and very instrumental in developing youth as being a mentor.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. Dr. Bailey?
Yes, people don't always see their own potential, whether they're 10 or whether they're 30. And we don't always know their backgrounds. So we don't always know the things that they struggled through to even get to where they are. And it's so important that along the way, somebody is willing to cheer them on. Somebody is willing to see past what is and see what's possible, and encourage them to move towards what's possible, because it's not always there, and especially in our communities. We don't have a long list of lawyers, or we don't have a long list of doctors or engineers or physicists or any, we don't have a long list of those in our history. So sometimes we have to look and see that somebody has if that's your desire and you want to work towards it, and as long as you're willing to work, we're willing to push and work and help you get there. And I think that is one of the ways that we can help people to develop, is to encourage them to see beyond their current circumstances and see what's possible, and help push them towards the thing that's possible. Because everything is out there and everything is open. We now see that we can have Black presidents, we can have women vice presidents, and Black and Indian and anything else. Everything is open. We don't have to just say it now. We see now that it is possible. And we have to encourage our youth and our adults to move towards it.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that mentor is an important role, because they have that outside perspective sometimes, where like when you're the person trying to, reach that potential, it's hard to see how far that goes. And then you have that outside person who can help and assist you and maybe lead you down the path where you can, finally reach that full potential. Our next question is, at what age do you recall mentorship being impactful to you? And if possible, share what that mentorship was like. Dr. Key?
Yeah, so for me, it was in church, literally. Like, I come from a real involved church family. And so being a singer, musician, and into the music, it was always like, I loved being around the folk that were musical. And so mentorship for me was I had to be next to the drummer or the organist or the soloist all the time and trying to learn techniques. So for me, that was that type of mentorship, because it was something I had a passion for. I think it made me, like, I was ready to go to church. Like, they didn't have to get me ready on Sundays. I was ready to go to choir rehearsal. So I was telling them, y'all gonna make us late, you know? And so I think for me, because that mentorship area intersected with the passion of mine, that it kind of really just took me to the next level in that area. And again, at the same time, I really wasn't realizing they were mentoring me, but yet they were, you know? And so I think for me, it was at a very young age, probably around 3 or 4, because I think I did my first solo at 3. So had to be around 4, 3 or 4, so.
That's pretty young. You out here, prodigy. Dr. Summers?
I just want to say for me, I was probably a senior in high school with my second mentor. My first mentor was my cousin, and she's a pediatrician, and I wanted to mimic her, like, because I saw she was so, you know, so studious, and everything she did, I wanted to do. And so I knew when I graduated that I wanted to go to medical school and follow her path. And so that was one of my mentors. And I was probably like 15, but then my second mentor was, we had to do a senior project. I went to Flint Central High School, and we had to do a senior project. And I shadowed a psychiatrist, and Dr. Poole, and I would go with her, and that was another route into medicine. So I was in high school, and I feel like I had probably mentors when I was younger, but I feel like when I really understood is when I was in high school.
Yeah, I have a similar experience. I had like plenty of mentors growing up, but once I reached high school, and, you know, there were some men who stepped into my life. They helped me understand the different talents I had when I didn't even know that they existed. And from that point, you know, my passion has taken over, and it's like I can't even think of myself not doing those things. Mrs. Gaines Taylor, did you have your hand raised?
Well, I think I identified mentorship. I didn't know the name of it, but I did know that they started moving me out of the classroom and into other spaces and other classes beyond my grade level. And that was because I was in Mississippi. And so there was not yet a developed magnet program. And so somebody looked at me in class and they said, she needs more. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized what they had done. And so I thought it was odd that my desk might have been in the hallway or on the other end with the other grade, or that I was taking, they gave me a flute. I think I was 10 years old. I was in the 5th grade, and they're like, okay, here's a flute, go down here. And then there was a program called Young Explorers. And that was for those individuals they identified were gifted, if you will, in what we now call STEM. And so I can recall going to like a 2-story hospital when I was 10 and 11 years old, shadowing physicians, but not realizing at the time what was really going on, the magnitude and the depth of what they were doing. And so I think because once I did realize it, and I was kind of rebellious, and this might have been after I took the MCAT, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor, but that was because nobody asked me. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have just stayed on the track that they had me on. And I do love what I do, but I didn't have like that direct conversation or one-on-one, or somebody saying, what would you like to do? We noticed that you are good with this, 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 and this. And so where do you want to take that? Or what would you like to do? But I do know that it started, I think maybe even before I was 10, but it was a very, very young age, maybe even 8. And my music teacher forced me to do a solo in the Christmas program at the top of the Christmas tree when I was 10. That's why that age sticks with me, because I was adamant that I did not want to do that because she told me to. So I don't know if anybody else has had like not a rebellious spirit, but you really want somebody to listen to you or to ask you, even at a young age, like, what do you want to do? Or where do you see yourself, instead of them just kind of throwing me in place. Oh, you have a beautiful voice. Get up there and sing the song. Oh, you're good in math. Well, go down there. You finished all this. They're just throwing things at you. Go down here. Go here. Go here. So that's why I said it's important for us to listen and develop. But it was a very young age that I think I started being mentored.
I'll be the first to admit, I'm kind of stubborn too. So when you don't ask for my input, I'm a little bit hard-headed. Mr. Matthews, you're up next.
Yeah, so I love this question, and both Ms. Stanley and Corey said some things that just like made me think about some things in my life. So I would say, I believe there's power in speaking person's names, right? So I need to say my mother's name, Constance Matthews, first, because my mother was, she was like Superwoman to me as a kid. And I am not ashamed to admit that I was a mama's boy. And so around 7 or 8 years old, I can remember my mother being very intentional about me spending time with my uncle who used to live in Flint but had moved away. And there was a guy that worked with her that later I adopted as my godfather that she connected me with. And both of them, I would give credit. She knew the importance of me having positive males in my life. And my father was not at the time. We later formed a very good relationship, but at that time he wasn't. But nevertheless, my uncle Samuel Matthews and my godfather James Eason were very instrumental as I grew in just helping to correct me when I needed correction, to share things with me, to expose me to lots of of positive things that I might not normally have just thought that I wanted to do. And so I'll share something that a lot of people may not know, that I am a very avid fan of boxing and MMA sports. And that goes back to my childhood. My godfather, there was not a year, for those who remember the Golden Gloves, there was not a year as a kid that I did not attend Golden Gloves events. And so, and for those who don't know, it's boxing, a boxing series for local amateurs. And, to this day, whenever I see that, I think of, he's passed, but I think of him in just the time that he spent with me and exposing me to different things. And so, those periods were very impactful. And the acknowledgement that my mother knew that I needed, as much as she was Superwoman, she knew that I needed to be around positive men. So, yeah.
That's powerful. I mean, I I can understand that completely. No, my mom is great, and she's been super impactful in my life. So she like my #1 fan. So I totally understand the sentiment of being like, yo, they were there for me first. Is there anyone else who wants to comment?
I'll comment. I just listening to everyone, I started thinking that we are who we are because of mentors, because of the people that have poured into our lives. And Dr. Kent and Ms. Taylor, I'm not a musician, but I remember my piano teacher. But one of the things that I learned, and that was impactful for me, was discipline, practice, and being prepared. And she taught me that. And she took a special consideration for me. I would take piano after school, but she allowed me to come to her home during the summer. And I walked there, and I was always on time. And I had always practiced every lesson. And at the end, I would get an ice cream sundae. And so it was good feeling that someone took the time, cared, and just made it special. But like I said, I don't play the piano now, and I don't sing, but I did gain discipline, a lot of discipline from that. and I was like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is a lot of us were young. And I think that's really key is them early years where, you're starting to see the world and, you're getting your own reflections of it and having those different perspectives of people who aren't necessarily your family. And even if they are, doing these great things and showing you that you can do them too is really important. And yeah, I mean, them toddler ages is really when you start to soak in information.
So as you transition to your last two questions, again, we have a lot of people I see joining us in watch parties and actually on Facebook. And so again, we want to just, those that are just tuning in, thank you for tuning in. I am Dr. Ken Key, and this is the Flint Public Health Youth Academy. And we're kicking off a series of Martin Luther King celebration weekend events. We have some wonderful guests on the platform today. Ms. Rita Stanley, Mr. Robert Matthews, Mrs. Corey Gaines Taylor, and Mrs. Afton Shavers. And they are leading a lot of youth mentoring programs throughout the city. And we are focused on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his life and his role as a mentor. And so we're kind of laying the foundation, and we'll kind of transition more into Dr. King. So again, thank you for joining us. Cruz, go ahead.
So this next question is, how has mentorship impacted your decisions and life goals? Kiara?
So for me, as an adult, my most recent mentor was one of my supervisors at an internship when I first got done here. And every time I want to do something that I think is self-serving or that I think I shouldn't be doing, I like see her in my head and it's like, oh, I can't make Ebony mad. Like, or like, I know Ebony's gonna tell me to do something different. And it's kind of, I don't know why it's like this effect of a guilt trip that they that they have on us, really just because they believed in us. All of you share perspective of mentors as students. And me, now that I'm done with school, it's like, my goal was to, start my career and move on. And then like this lady pulls me aside and she's like, no, like you're gonna do this and I see this in you. And it's like, ma'am, like I'm just trying to, like, it's hard when somebody sees something in you that you don't see. And then it's like almost an obligation to go forth and do those things that they pointed out and that you deep down know is right, whether or not you feel like doing those things at the time. So I don't know if that's a clear, I don't know, it sounds negative, but to say it's kind of like this overarching like guilt or shadow on your head.
No, I totally get it. Like that extra pressure help you, do the things that you're supposed to and meant to do.
So Cruz, I was going to say, one of my mentors, Mrs. E. Hill Deloney, teaches the youth in Freedom School that care, and you went to Freedom School. You're a Freedom School kid who's now in DC in law school, right? So we see what mentorship and how that got you there, right? But one of the things she taught us is character is who I am when no one else is looking, right? And so that's what, when we want to do something that's a little self-serving and we can kind of hear them standing in our ear, that's part of that mentorship, right? And so I totally agree. And I think that it impacts not only the decisions that we make, but as we're choosing life goals, I think we can hear the voices of our mentors oftentimes in our head. And I think that that's part of what this whole circle of life and this whole village is about, in shaping, helping us to see what's not in us, but then shaping our mind and our forethought so that as we move forward and project in our trajectory, that we actually have those guiding voices. So yeah, they definitely have been impactful for me in my life decision, because I wasn't going to go in public health. I was going to be in engineering. I had went to Kettering University, and I literally public health found me. And so it's just kind of how you connect with your mentors and then how they see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And I just think that from that point, it has been very impactful for me as I move forward and as I'm continuing to make life choices.
Mrs. Taylor?
The song, I always feel like somebody's watching me. That's what resonated with me when you asked that question. And so, and it's not just those who are watching me that I'm mentoring, but those who have an expectation of me who mentored me, those who helped shape me, and those who they may not be here anymore. They may be among the ancestors, but they're still watching. And I still feel that I owe something, not only to my brothers and sisters that were birthed by my mother, but to my community. I feel a great sense of community as it surrounds the village, and the village is the community, especially because of our culture. And so if we don't look out for each other and we don't keep our village tight and make sure that we're moving together, we're moving as an amoeba. So when one of us, when I move, you move, just like that. That's how we should do this thing. And so when we go, we all go together. If we're staying, we're all staying together. And I want to see us continue to move forward. This is a great time in history to make history. And every day is a day for history to be made. And so why not be a part of it? And if I am, then you are, because we're a village.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to Dr. Bailey first.
Well, I think back to the mentors that I had, and you know, along the way you get different mentors. Um, Different people push you to do different things. You may start out young, and you may have a mentor that might just push you to get through school. But then I went to work and very early, and I had a good job. I worked at the Flint Board of Ed, and I worked in the accounting department. And I was very quiet. I kept to myself, and I did what most accountants do: keep your head down and keep going. But my boss saw something different, and he suggested, and everybody says that this man had racist tendencies, but he saw something different in me. Called me into the office. I thought I was getting fired. And he said, "No, I've called a friend, and if you want to, you can go talk to them, and they're ready to accept you in school now. And you don't even have to worry about it. It will be paid for." And it just required me to make the decision to do it. And it wasn't that I wasn't smart enough to do it. I had been pushed along all along. It's just that in my family, I was the first. So there wasn't a lot of push beyond getting out of high school for me. So I can really identify when there is someone else who comes along and they're not really being pushed to their ultimate potential by their family simply because they would be the first. And along the way, I've gotten other mentors who taught me to do things that I never knew how to do, or I probably would never have learned, certainly not in college. I didn't learn how to do those things. And they taught me the rudiments of how to work in the community and how to interact with people. So along the way, there have been people who've taught me to do things that even though I had gone to college, I would not have known exactly how to do that. And today, when I think about some things, I go back and I can hear those people talking in my head saying, "No, don't do that. Do it this way. It'll go much smoother if you try it like this." I can still hear their voices, and they've been gone for a long time, but they are living on in the things that I do. And I'm hoping that there's somebody along the way that some things that I've shared with them will be passed on and will live on beyond my days. And that's the best that I can do. But it's just understanding and knowing that people don't always have to be your relative to love you enough to correct you and push you. Because along with mentoring comes correction. And I don't think we talked about that yet, but it does come, because a lot of times somebody has to tell you, baby, don't do it that way. You're going to get burnt if you do it like that. And part of being a mentee is being willing to accept when the correction comes.
Yeah.
I gotta give her a ashe.
So Ms. Shavers, do you have an answer?
Yeah, really quickly, because
yeah.
she just hit on what I was gonna say. I was gonna say that for me, in terms of being a mentor and being a mentee and achieving my goals or making decisions, it comes down to three things. So as a mentor, you have to lift the person up, you have to hold the person down, and you also got to hold them accountable. And so those three things have to happen in conjunction for it to be successful. So for me to successfully mentor you, I have to do those three things. And for you to be successfully mentored by me, you have to do those three things. Because if I'm trying to support you, you got to let me. If I'm trying to steer you, you've got to be willing to be steered or be willing to be corrected. And when you going way off in left field, I have to have that accountability to bring you back to the table. Like, no, this ain't gonna work. So it's really a combination of those three things. And so you can't really support somebody without also making sure that they know that you're there no matter what. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to be accountable for the choices or decisions that they're making.
All right. I want to move on to my last question. As a professional, do you still have mentors today? And how has that relationship changed and or evolved over time? And we sort of got into this, but I really want to focus on that. How has it changed?
And right when you were asking the question, I saw Everett raise his hand, Cruz. I don't think you saw him.
Oh, I didn't. You can go, Everett.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say hello to everybody. I know I just popped on. I was having connection issues, but it's great to see everybody. But what Mrs. Shavers and Dr. Bailey were just saying really stuck with me as a young person going through this point in life where I'm starting to see a lot of my mentors have told me things and like, hey, don't do it this way, you'll get burned. And like, I'm starting to get burned every once in a while. So it's really like refreshing to see that I'm not the only one, going through these things. And I'm glad that I have mentors because now I'm like kind of heeding the warning now. I'm kind of thinking to myself like, hey, I got people telling me not to do it this way. So I probably shouldn't do it this way. So that's like a really, really powerful thing for me.
You are for sure right. You are not alone. I've felt that so many times. But yeah. Anyone ready to answer? Kiara?
So for me, it's like when you have a kid on a bike and then you like take their training wheels off and you just like push them down the street and they like expect you to still be back there. Growing up, I always had somebody I can call. And I have these two options. And I'm getting advice from somebody and because they're going to steer me for the choice I'm supposed to make. And now when I call somebody, it's always, well, Kiera, you know what to do. So you have to make this decision for yourself or out something. And I'm like, excuse me, please tell me yes or no. And they're like, no, you're an adult now. This is what it is. You have all the tools. I'm like, I have no tools. I'm not prepared. And so I never feel alone or anything like that, but that's what I feel like. Somebody pushed me down the street without my training wheels and I did not have a say in when they were going to come off. But I do always have a support system. So how it's changed for me is someone telling me what to do as a child and someone trusting me to make the right decision as an adult and still being there to support me, whichever way I decide to go.
Mr. Matthews?
So the short answer is yes. But beyond that, I think the way that it's evolved is just being very clear about recognizing that you need people from all walks of life You need people who have had different experiences. You need people who don't look like you, who may not always share all of the same values that you share. And you need to be open to hearing and receiving what they may be providing directly and indirectly at times. And so, because of that, I see mentoring relationships not always as formal. Sometimes they are very informal. And sometimes you may choose the mentor, and other times they may choose you. And so, I think it's just important to understand, and I grew to understand, to be open to that, right? Because if you're not open to that, it's easy. I think there was a quote in a speech by Malcolm X when he was talking to, at that time, a group of white people, saying, if the words of salvation came to you from the mouth of a Black man, would you be able to receive it? And so I think about that in terms of even mentoring relationships. If the words that you needed to hear came to you from someone who you didn't like, someone who didn't look like you, someone who went to a different church that you go to, who doesn't believe what you believe, whatever, would you be able to receive it? And so I think, I'm always just trying to check myself and be open to that, because, I believe that that's a part of growth and evolution. And so, as a professional, I keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think that being open is like a key essential there, because there have been some people who like come into my life and my initial reaction was like, I don't know you and I don't know your people, so I don't know what you're about. But they still offered excellent advice. And so sometimes you just need to learn to accept that and then take it for what it's worth. Does anybody else have an answer? All right. If not, I want to pass it on to Amire.
Hi, hello everyone. So my set of questions is more focused on Dr. King and how it's still tying into the mentors and mentees and everything like that. So the first question, when you think of Dr. King, what is the most impactful mentor quality you feel like he embraced? And so if Cruz can aid me a little bit in seeing some of the raising hands, because I can't really see that much. So if the floor is open. So
Ms. Stanley, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I wasn't raising their hand. Let's see. Okay, Kira, yep.
I'm sorry, we had Ms. Stanley first and then Kira.
Okay. So the quality that I think that Dr. King has or had as an impactful mentor is that he is a role model. He was a role model for people. And he talked about being judged by the content of your character. And so I think that was a strength and that attracted people to him as a mentor. So I think that was one of his most impactful qualities.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree from the standpoint of, during that time period, it was a very, very treacherous time, and he was able to really rise above everything and really speak his message and what he believed in. So I think that was a very, very good quality of his. Kira, and then Dr. Bailey.
For me, I think it'll be his ability to accept others as allies, and also on his march, not just his march for freedom, but all of his activism, bringing in other people like him, and who were different, who all had, I guess, the same goals. And I think Mr. Matthews was just speaking on this earlier. Even though there are people in his group, family, or just group of people who felt like he should not have been associating with different people, he knew that in order to get his job done, that he had to. And I think we would not have got as far if we didn't have those allies, and that if he wasn't as open-minded to be able to accept that help.
Yep, I completely agree with that. His open-mindedness was one of the big traits that he had, and able to reach across the aisle and able to, agree with a different side, a different perspective of things. So that's an important thing. Dr. Bailey?
If I go back and I remember, he was consistent and persistent. He was consistent and he was persistent. He was the same no matter where he was. And no matter who he was dealing with, he was always the same person. And he was persistent. He marched forward towards his goal, and he didn't let anything prevent him from reaching the goal that he had. And even though he knew every day he faced death, as he said, he had been to the mountaintop, but he had a vision because he saw beyond where he was. So for me, that was the most impactful, is to try to be consistent and then be persistent in what I'm trying to do.
Dr.
Afton, her hand has been up.
Okay.
She has a little blue hand up, and then Mr. Matthews, and then Ms. Gaines Taylor.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to be super quick too. So my favorite quote of all time by Martin Luther King Jr. is, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And so service as leadership to me is the biggest part of his legacy and mentoring. If service is beneath you, then so is leadership, right? You really have to be a servant to lead. And both of those things make you a good mentor.
So that's why Afton was before me, because servant leadership, I think, is at the foundation. So since you gave me the alley-oop, I'm gonna just put it out there, right? So many of you know that Dr. King was also a member of the greatest fraternity in the world, Alpha Phi Alpha. Our motto is, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all. So I believe that, his study of Gandhi's work and other things really positioned him to fully embrace, that motto, and to really exhibit the qualities of servant leadership, which of course, just permeates through his ability to impact lives throughout the world.
So it's so befitting that it falls in my lap now. Is that correct? Am I keeping track here? Because I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and our motto is service to all mankind. And so in keeping with Dr. King being consistent and persistent, I believe that he was consistent and persistent in knowing that God is love. And so his quote that he said, where I have decided to stick with love, hate is too great a burden to bear. It just reminds me to always, always stick with love. Love will lead you, and you will be a great servant. You will provide a great service because you will be operating under the guidance of God and love. And so I think that we're all kind of saying the same thing in a different way. And that's why I'm smiling, because this just makes me so happy. I'm overjoyed right now, and I'm tickled pink and green.
Yes, Dr. Key. Yeah.
I think for me, the most impactful mentor quality he had was his ability to recognize humanity in all people. Mrs. Deloney also teaches the Freedom School quite often that there should be no distinction between your destiny and that of your brother. So you should never see yourself getting to one place and someone getting to a lesser place. There shouldn't be a distinction. And so I think when we can get to the point where we see everyone as we see ourselves, then we can really embrace that whole servant leader quality. And it allows us to be the most impactful, not only to ourselves or just to our four and no more, but to the entire world.
Yes, I completely agree with all those statements. He had a real knack of being able to put himself in other people's shoes and be able to, see the humanity in everyone. And I think that's a very, very important quality of leadership, and not seeing, the hierarchy, or seeing yourself in a higher position. So I think that was a great thing about Dr. King. Anyone else want to add on? Okay.
I'll add on.
Okay.
Since he's a Morehouse alumni, I had to slide in too. One of the traits that I think also was excellent is his ability to kind of take things to the chin. With him being the figurehead, he was pushed against a lot of adversity. And until the end, he persevered through because he was so passionate about the work that he was doing. And I think that's really important for us to not allow things to get us stuck in the mud, and we just keep trekking through.
Yes, he had a very, very persistent and just keep on pushing forward type of attitude. And I think that's what made him go very, very far, and what his ultimate mission was in bringing peace to everyone. So next, what we have here is, in what ways do you think Dr. King's mentorship skills prepared him for moments such as the March on Washington, and ultimately the civil rights movement that he would lead? So the floor is open.
Dr. Key.
I'll start off. I think what prepared him was he was kind of rooted and grounded in like good, strong teachings. And what I mean by that, we know his father was a pastor, and we know he had a legacy of being taught, service and love for your fellow man. But then those that he never met, he studied Gandhi, he studied so many others, but that helped to root him and to literally ground him for not only the moment, such as the speech at March on Washington, but also that movement. Because that movement, it created a lot of tumultuous winds, that blow. They were blowing everywhere. He was getting, like you said, hit from side to side, but he was rooted so that he was able to withstand that and to actually create a way for us in 2021 to do things that they could not do in the 60s, right? To go places that they could not go in the 60s. And so I'm just grateful that he was rooted the way he was rooted. And so I think that was one of the things that prepared him for both the moment and the movement.
Yes, I completely agree. With him taking a bunch of different leadership methods and combining them basically, and being all around sound individual, and really persisting and being able to carry that weight of what he would lead in the civil rights movement. Anyone else want to go ahead?
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, so I think along the same lines, I believe that he really understood the difference between what a peaceful movement could do versus being passive, right? And so there were many who accused him of being passive, but there's a big difference between peaceful and passive. And so I think that strategy itself is what was really critical to ensure that those moments could catapult into a movement, right? So that's you probably heard the saying before that, culture can trump strategy. So the strategy that was being used in adopting those peaceful practices really helped to overcome the culture that existed at the time in this country. And it was deliberate, and as we've heard earlier, the consistency and persistence just helped to change things.
Yes, I completely agree with that. That his way of using his method of being peaceful and everything, we could have took it a whole other different route, and that wouldn't have been as effective and worked in that type of situation. So he was very, very good with peaceful and making sure that we had a good message out so people could understand what we were going through from our point of view. Yes, Dr. Bailey.
Yes, I think he surrounded himself with people of like precious faith, um, that he could draw from in times of adversity. Um, with all of the different winds that were blowing, there were people who could whisper in his ear and keep him grounded in what his purpose was. I don't really think he thought about a movement at the time that he was doing what he was doing. We see it now as being a movement, but I think what he was doing at that time was trying to get us from one place to another and never realizing that it was something bigger, just bigger, 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 bigger than where he was in that particular moment. We defined that it became a movement, but at the time it was the people that was around him. He was surrounded with people who could keep him grounded, you know, and because I can go back and I can remember, because youth will have you do a whole lot of crazy because there's a lot of energy behind youth, and youth always wants to push through. But he had a lot of elders because he was young himself. He was only 39 when this happened to him. So he was still young himself and still had a lot of youth in him, but there were a lot of elders that kept him grounded in who he was and what he was about. So that when the youth pushed back, because if I can remember, SNCC pushed. When youth pushed back, he was able to stay level and stay in the vein that he was going in and not veer off to pick up something different.
Yes, I completely agree with that statement because he was able to, control his emotion, you can say, because at that time, you could really, take it into a bad place if you wanted to, but he just had to keep level-headed, and he was able to have everyone else buy in around him, which really helped. So anyone else? Please keep it short if you don't mind, because you got to transition to the next question. Okay. Next question.
Mrs. James Taylor, you can go.
Taylor, get her hand up.
Oh, I was going to keep it really short and say nothing, but so I will say just the people, his passion, knowing his purpose, obviously at a very young age, being very well rooted at a young age, and being driven by his passion to lead something that he might not have known in the moment was a movement is one thing. To just, you can't really wrap that up into one word, but you can kind of in two, and that would be, well, three, Martin Luther King. So that's what I
have. That was a very, very good statement. I really appreciate that. So the next question is, how are you fulfilling Dr. King's legacy? The floor is open.
I feel that I continue his legacy by trying my best to remain peaceful. When I just want to implode, explode, and go straight Tasmanian, and I won't say the other part to that, but we are faced with some trying comments, trying situations, and trying times. And so I have to remind myself to remain peaceful, to hold my passion and hold my peace. And so when I think about the extent and the magnitude of what he was able to accomplish just by holding his peace in those times, that's what keeps me motivated. And that's what I carry with me. And I might still be working on some of that every day, especially in this new year.
Very, very good. Because, in this really rough political climate that we have going on, it's easy to, to lose your cool or, really take it to a bad a bad level that, you probably want to take it, but it's easier to heed Dr. King's message and stay peaceful and remain level-headed. So anyone else wanna add?
I think Afton has her hand up in the.
Okay.
So I was going to say, I think honestly, all of us here, both mentors and mentees, the easiest way for us to uphold Dr. King's legacy is to be an example, right? So you want to just lead by example. So anytime that you have the opportunity to speak truth to power, you want to do it. Anytime you have the opportunity to make room at the table or bring a folding chair to the table for someone else, you want to do that. Anytime you have the ability to, as some folks say, put somebody else on, right? You want to do that. So anytime you have an opportunity to actually walk it, that you take that opportunity and fulfill it is all you can do to kind of continue the legacy. And it's not these big moments. It's not the huge, movement. Like you said, when Dr. King was doing this, he wasn't expecting what happened to turn out the way that it did. But every time you make a single decision to lead by example, then you're walking in that legacy.
Very, very good. I think it was all about, putting other people in a very, very good position to be able to keep on persisting this message and pushing it forward. So Dr. Bailey.
Miss Stanley was in before me. She can go.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bailey. And I think Afton said it best. Fulfilling his legacy, I believe I'm a servant leader. That's what the title that I feel comfortable with. Looking at the needs in our community and responding to those needs, especially the needs of the people who are underserved and underrepresented. So through my work, I'm able to do that. I feel rewarded to be able to change lives through other people, through the mentorship of other people. So that's pretty much. Thank you, Dr. Bailey.
I just see the fact that we're here on a Friday night. We could be doing a lot of different other things, but we're here. And if we're carrying on his legacy in any kind of way, at least I know for myself and for some of the other professionals on here, just being here with you guys tonight is one of the examples of how we can carry on. Because a lot of people want to do big things, but sometimes it's just really the small things, just being in that space with people who can draw from you is part of what will help us to carry his legacy forward. And I'm just enjoying this. This has been so refreshing. And I really would like to thank everybody because you're inspiring me. This is really good.
I thought I saw Amire Monisha hand up too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna echo like what Afton, what everyone was saying, pretty much is just like, never give up and keep pushing. And even like if you saw like, you had a mentee or even for yourself, just that support, like sometimes you don't know, a little support goes a long way. Like I could just recall like when I was in college, I worked at a preschool and one of the girls invited me to her dance recital. Just me going and showing support. Like I would say like 5 years ago, she reached out to me. Like, I remember when I was like 7 years old, you came to my dance recital. So it's just, I feel like continuing his legacy would be to just be there, be supportive. And then for yourself and to encourage others to never give up and to keep pushing.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Cruz?
So what I've been hearing a lot of is just what matters is being genuine and intentional. Like that's truly what can help, continue his legacy, make sure it perseveres, is doing what you feel is right. That's kind of why he did everything. And then he planned his way out on how to do it. And it doesn't matter how little or small or big it can be. What matters is that you're taking your part and choosing to do that thing.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I just want to thank all of you, because all of you have really helped change people's lives and really have really showed people the way, to give positive and wonderful nourishment to people and really good, learning lessons and life lessons to people. So I really appreciate that for, everyone in this Zoom call being here. So the last one is, if you had one last conversation with your mentees, what is the greatest lesson and pearl of wisdom that you would share with them? Okay. Cruz, can you help me out here?
Captain has her hand up.
Okay, yeah.
So, greatest thing that I personally have learned over the last 3 years is what I'm sharing out to everybody. So it's two things. Number one is that there is no set way to achieve your purpose. I think a lot of us mess ourselves up because we have this idea it's got to go like this. We're going A, we're going to B, we're going to C. And then when L happens, you are screwed because you are so fixated on how you thought it was going to go. So there is no set way to achieve your purpose. If it don't work out to day 1, 12, 1500, there's always day 1600 that you can try. No set way. And then the second thing is the thing that COVID has taught me, and that is choose joy. We don't know every 5 minutes if we're gonna still be here. And so every chance that you get, you gotta choose joy.
Yes, I completely agree with that. In these times, in particular, it's really easy to have like a negative attitude or, being down on things. But if you have a positive mindset, you can really achieve great things. So anyone else have their hand up that I missed? Because I can't.
Mrs. Gaines Taylor.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, I'll go. So what I would say to my mentee, if it was our last conversation, I would say, I love you. Trust your instincts. You got this and you can do this. Never, ever give up. And I often have to say, you don't need me physically there because I'm always with you anyway. But really just to ingrain in them how much I love them, how important they are, how important whatever they have committed to do is, and that they should really trust and believe in themselves. And if I'm not available, feel free to reach out to someone else.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Yes, Mr. Matthews.
So I'm gonna tease Corey before I go because I was thinking to myself, Corey's gonna give us 20 pearls of wisdom, and not the one because I know she likes them 20 pearls.
Yes.
But anyway, so I would say fully embrace the fact that there's only one you and the unique gifts that you have to offer to this community and to the world. So I dare you to be different because you are.
Thanks for the 20 pearl shout out. I received that.
Yes, I think it's all about, passing along information and being able to contribute in a very wonderful way and create positive change. That's what it's all about. Who else wants to chime in?
Dr. Bailey.
Dr. Bailey, yes.
Yeah, I have my kids and my pearls ready for Wednesday. And I just want to say that for anyone, it's about loving yourself because you cannot love anybody else or share love with anybody else until you learn to love yourself. So a lot of times we want to make it go out first, but first it has to come in, and you have to learn to love yourself. And then you can share love, spread abroad in your heart, then it can go outward. So just learn to love yourself. Trust yourself. Be yourself.
Anyone want to add on?
Well, I was just going to piggyback off of Afton and Dr. Bailey, especially with COVID-19, to take care of yourself and love yourself and be your best self and give your best. So that would be my last conversation with my mentee.
So Amir, I'll give the final remark to that question and then do the close out.
Okay. Yeah.
So we want to first thank Amir and Cruz for being wonderful talk show facilitators for us on today. In response to your question, if I had one last conversation with my mentees, I told you music is my world. And so I grew up loving the Clark sisters. And I remember one time singing the song, I'm looking for a miracle. And they get to the part, the sky is the limit to what I can have. And I remember my grandmother said, now I love the Clark sisters too, but the sky is not your limit. And she put on another song that the First Church of Deliverance out of Chicago, Illinois recorded that said, you can have as far as you can see. And grandmother said, so if you can see beyond the sky, baby, you can have it, you know? And so that's what I would tell my mentees is that if you can see beyond the sky, you can have it. And I'll also end with the statement that Ms. Gaines Taylor just said a couple of minutes ago in a couple of the questions. I wrote it down because I'm like, that's a t-shirt, that's a hashtag. But what she said was, this is a great time in history to make history. That's what I would tell my mentees. This is a great time in history to make history. So again, we want to thank our guests, Mrs. Stanley, Mrs. Gaines Taylor, Ms. Afton Schaefer's, and Mr. Matthews, who have some dynamic youth programs. And just check out our page because I'm posting all of the youth events that we have. We have a breakfast on Monday morning at 9:30 with Big Brothers and Sisters, and that's what Miss Stanley has that. And so I'm posting all of that information. Make sure you go to their webpage and go to their Facebook. If you have not RSVP'd, make sure that you do so. We also have another event at 12:30 where we'll have another talk show, and we'll be talking about intergenerational transfer of knowledge as we prepare and understand that one of the things that Dr. Martin Luther King did, not only did he have mentors, but he mentored others. And so how do we transfer that intergenerational knowledge? So we have a wonderful weekend of events celebrating Martin Luther King. And we thank you all so much for joining in. Again, our next talk show will be on February the 12th, and we'll get back into our every other week rotation. But we have this special week planned out to really celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So again, this is the Flint Public Health Youth Academy. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Key. Thank you. This was awesome. Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
This was